I didn't actually ask to come to USD or the College for Women. I was really just sent here to assist Sister Agnes Schmidt in the chemistry department in 1959. And my experience here in the College for Women at USD shaped me in that it gave me love and the ability to change and be challenged. And in those early years, the students and campus life was very carefully regulated. Now it seems to be much more open and not so restricted. Well, I taught from 59 to 99, and 40 years, and always in the basement of Camino. So, Camino Hall. Wow. The chemistry lab was really very good, and chemistry and biology worked together. So sometimes I could go down and borrow some of their equipment down the corridor and that kind of thing. And so it really went very well in those early years down there. I have a lot of funny remembrances, but I don't need to share those today. At the College for Women, we always, to have fun, we invited military, and they came, whether they were Navy men or in the Army or whatever. They came and danced, and we would hire bands to play, and then they would dance out there on the patio or in that room that is now part of the health services. And I think a lot of them then married military persons because they met them there. And then at the breaks, they would have Noel Hall sing and play his guitar with Irish music. So those are some of the things that I remember, where now the students can go off campus much more, and they even now, as of a year ago, have a bar on campus. So those who are 21 years and older can go, and it's a very popular place. And that's so much safer to have the bar on campus rather than to go to a bar and then have to drive back. What I observed, the social media here at USD, in the beginning, it seemed always to be English-speaking and Spanish-speaking students. So many of them came from across the border, from Mexico. And so most of those, they wanted always to major in French. They loved Madame Rigsby, and they would go and study abroad in France, where now the students are studying abroad, like in China. Now we have a very diverse group of students, especially after Vatican II. We just have, we have Muslims and Arabs and Asians and, just from all parts of the world here, Africa, South America. You just have a great variety of students. So one defining experience was having some of our very young nuns from Uganda, Kenya here studying, and they were in my class. And they worked so hard and would always come to office hours. And I even got scolded. They told me that I was giving more time to them, and I said, the others can come at office hours, but they would always be exact. There were two persons who made a big impact on my life, probably many more, but one was Dr. Cole Maines from the biology department. He had an MD PhD, and it was that he gave us, and us, faculty and staff met with him one time, and he explained when life began. Not at conception, but about 5 days later when the ova attached to the wall of the uterus. Then, because before then you have a lot of twinning and you have all kinds of things that go on. And so before he passed away, he asked his wife, am I really a Catholic, because of what I believe? She said, yes, you are. But he was a wonderful person who really explained things to me. And so, especially when I was teaching a course for science, for non-science majors, I'd say, now the Catholic Church teaches this, but as a scientist, I think this. The other person who made a big difference in my life was Sister Sally Fury. When she was Dean of Arts and Sciences, there was a lawsuit by two of the professors. And that's when she realized that in order to take a position like that, or later as provost, she had to have a law degree. And so at night, she took classes at our law school, studied for the bar, and passed it on the first time around. So it taught me something about her. She was a very, very special person. One of my fondest memories as a professor here at USD is joining Sister Helen Lorch and many others in the old sports center where we rooted for the men's basketball games. That's something I just will never forget. My favorite place on campus in the old days was the beautiful garden across the street from Founders and Camino Hall. You could walk and sit and pray. And even then, in those old, cloistered days before Vatican II. Also, after the Immaculata was built, we could look up at the special window that Bishop Buddy had put in on the west side of the Immaculata because we couldn't go to the Immaculata. That was outside of cloister. And there on the window was the picture of the glass, stained glass window with the Sacred Heart, with St. Madeleine Sophie, our foundress, and with St. Philippine Duchesne, who brought us to the United States. My favorite projects here at USD was working with Esperanza Hasso. And she was one of our Mexican nuns who lived and worked out there in Coachella Valley in a very small town called Mecca. And so we started bringing the young high school students, they were in her RSCJ class, preparing for their sacraments, primarily for confirmation. And so we would bring them in, they could stay overnight here, and we would take them to the undergraduate admissions office, and they would find out how to apply and that kind of thing. And they'd go to an athletic event on campus. They would eat with our students in the Student Life Pavilion. And that is still going on. And we call it the Mecca Youth Group. And just about 2 weeks ago, we brought in a group, and then in our vans, and then took them back after they stayed overnight in the entranceways of students' apartments here on campus. And as a result, over the years, at least 6 women came here. And one of them, well, they all came here, graduated from here. One of them got her master's and then her PhD. Another worked here for years and is now married and works out closer to Mecca in Coachella Valley. But we've never had any of the young men actually come here and get involved. They either didn't make the grade or whatever. But it was the women who came. And so I still expect, having visited with them just 2 weeks ago, that a couple of those are very determined. They even know what they want to major in. At least they think they know what they want to major in. And the fact that they come from such poor background, they have a better chance of getting into USD and getting scholarships. I see us always being and becoming more globally competent, more diverse, and continuing the study abroad program. In the past, our students primarily studied in France, but now you find them studying and spending a semester in China, India, South Africa, or other places in Africa. So you find them reaching out in a very different way, and they look at their lives much more globally than they did in the past, I would say. The merger of the university in 1968, it had a significant impact on the university, in which Sally Fury became the provost and Dr. Art Hughes became the president. I think it was in 1970 or 1972. And that did make a big change. For me, I began to have young men in my classes after that, because before then, I only taught women in the classes, in my science classes. But then I started having men in my classes. And that did make a difference. And I have come to know some very significant doctors. Like one is a neurosurgeon. He's very, very special. And so those are some of my thoughts about that time. In 1968, when all the science departments merged and became one department. So I met biology professors, physics professors, and even the math professors were part of that department. And it was very interesting, and it challenged me and got me to move ahead and get help from some of those people in what I was doing. But what I liked a little bit later was when we found out that that would not work, having that many departments together. Then when all of the chemistry department moved to the basement of Camino Hall, then even the male faculty and all, we were all down in the basement of Camino Hall. And that was very helpful, because before, when I wanted to ask them a question, I'd have to walk like 3 blocks across over to the basement of Sarah Hall to ask a question, where once we all moved into the basement of Camino, then I could get a question answered from someone that I needed to get some more information on specific enzymes or whatever. It was Sister Agnes Schmidt who got me. She had read in an article that out at San Diego State, they had a summer research project for college professors of chemistry. So I applied, and I got into it, and I was the first woman in that project. So it was very challenging, but it was, and I think I had to work twice as hard as any of the men in that project. But I met the professor there, who then said to me, why don't you take a sabbatical? So you could take 3 years off and not lose your professorship. So I took a 3-year sabbatical and got into the joint doctoral program between San Diego State and UCSD. And we had to take our classes out at UCSD, but we did our research at San Diego State. And that's when I began to work with fungi, Aspergillus nidulans and others, and began to learn how to clone genes and different things like that. So it was very, very helpful. And it got me going in, and I got my PhD, and I was the first woman in the project out there at San Diego State. So I did get my PhD there, and then came back to teach. And I had many other wonderful experiences that I joined a group of women scientists called Graduate Women in Science. And they, I always say, I joined them for money, and it paid off because I was able to get a national grant, a Science Foundation grant, because I not only, and it was grants for women, and it was not only that I was going to do my research at the University of Georgia in Athens, but that I would establish a chapter of Graduate Women in Science there that would build a women's relationship in higher education and that kind of thing. For me, as a cloistered religious after Vatican II, if we wanted to remain cloistered, we couldn't teach. And if we wanted to teach, we couldn't be cloistered. So obviously, we chose to continue to teach because our order is based on educating, at that time, educating women. But after Vatican II, I remember my mother made me my first outfit, a little jacket and a jumper and a blouse, etc., so I could wear it. And I remembered, in the old days when they would come and visit, we had to visit here in this French parlor, or we could visit across the street in the little garden or out in one of the patios, but we could never go anywhere else. So after that, I even could go up to visit my family and that kind of thing after Vatican II. Now, St. Madeleine Sophie that was the reason she began to found our order, was that her brother was a Jesuit and he educated her. So she wanted to educate women so that they could move on in life. I had to write a letter to her and then visit with her, and she accepted me. And that was back, that was back in 49, because I was accepted, but then I developed a disease called lupus erythematosus, and so I couldn't enter. And that's when Sister Marion Kent asked me to bring my mother up to San Francisco College for Women, Lone Mountain, and she gave my mother, she gave me, and she had a little prayer to Blessed Philippine Duchenne, and she said, let's pray that this will all disappear so that you can enter, because you couldn't enter if you were not in good health. So we said the prayer, and a month later it was gone. Now, Philippine Duchenne didn't need one of more miracle, so it was never a miracle. When she was canonized, I was permitted to go to Rome for the canonization. And I went along with alums of the Sacred Heart from USD on that. Mother Rosalie Hill was the superior here at the College for Women when I arrived. And I would go for spiritual direction sometimes with her. And she is the one who then helped me get ready to apply to go for my final vows in Rome. But she did become ill, and I was one of the nuns who was able to be at her side when she was dying. And in fact, my bedroom right now is her bedroom. But then the next superior was not as easy to work with as Reverend Mother Rosalie Hill. I've spent a lot of time with a group that now is called Founders Club. In the beginning, it was called Sacred Heart Club, and it consisted of women who had graduated, women who'd graduated from Sacred Heart schools. And then I'd say 5 or 6 years after getting that going, because we began to go down and build houses down in Tijuana. There were some young men and other women who said, our parents graduated from USD. Why can't they be in this group? And so then the group was called Sacred Heart Second Generation Club. And we used to work with a professor in the School of Business and go down and build those houses, those stone block houses, etc. And we have wonderful pictures from those days. And then the university was a little worried about if somebody got hurt there, they would be sued, you know. So then we stopped doing that, and we started one young man who was part of Founders Club. He had gone to St. Augustine's High School, and the Augustinians have an orphanage down in the bottom part of the south part of Tijuana called La Gloria. And so we started then going to La Gloria Orphanage and working with the children there. And then it was that my own cousin, who was the president of Founders Club, she got a group together, and we all went down. It was the Arnaizes who graduated from here, Elsa Arnaiz and Raimundo Arnaiz. They had graduated from here, and they had a wonderful large set of condos down there. And so they allowed the students to come and free to stay in the condos. So we had all the girls in one and all the guys in another. And we also had John Trifoletti with us. And together, the students came up with a new name for the club, and they called it Founders Club. It was to represent or keep the spirit of Bishop Buddy and Reverend Mother Hill going. And that's why it was called Founders Club, because there are a lot of students here that don't know that Bishop Buddy was a Sacred Heart alum, that he went to our school in St. Joseph, Missouri. So when he came here, he got in touch with our order, and they sent Reverend Mother Hill, and we got a small little convent down in Old Town, and together, Bishop Buddy and Reverend Mother Hill picked out the property and the Religious of the Sacred Heart then bought certain part of this land, and then Bishop Buddy got some of his more wealthy people of the diocese to buy little sections of this property, because this property was all military. It was a military watch point that they could, with telescopes, they could watch ships coming in or out of the bay and different things like that. And so it was a military spot. And then it became USD after we bought different sections of the property. So those are my memories of those early days. Okay, Bishop Buddy and Reverend Mother Hill looked at a variety of properties. One was out where Point Loma Nazarene College is, and that's when Reverend Mother Hill said it will be too foggy too often, and that's when they decided not to choose that property, but then finally decided on this military base property. Any student graduating from USD should be able to become not only an alum of USD, but an alum of the Sacred Heart. And as a result, most people don't even know that, but each year, those in Founders Club who decide to become alums of the Sacred Heart do. And they've had wonderful experiences staying in London with our nuns there. We used to have a hostel house there. Right now they've sold that, or going to our houses throughout the world, because we're in at least 41 different countries. Some, in fact, our women's basketball team was down in Australia about, I don't know whether it was 5 years ago, and the women wanted to stay on a boat on the bay because that was a wonderful experience for them. But the actual coaches went to our school that's right on Rose Bay, and they visited there and saw that school that was founded, you know, not too long after we had moved to United States with Philippine Duchenne. Another person, RSCJ, with a group, went to Australia and built that house right on Rose Bay, and a school there. So our students can visit all these different places. And Sister Betsy Walsh and myself, we always buy tickets for the football games. And then I did go to a women's soccer game and got sold on that, and met the parents of a couple of the soccer players. But I've been a great advocate of women's basketball. And a number of years ago, I was asked to pray with them before the games. But I told them that had never done that before in my life. And they said, oh, but you can do it. And so I started praying with them for their home games. And before each home game, we pray in the locker room for the game. And so I usually tell people that I'm really addicted to basketball. And so, because see, you had heard me say I loved Sister Lorch, and we would go and watch the men's basketball games, you know. And I do go to the men's basketball games also.